Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Emergency Assistance for Livestock, Honeybees, and Farm-Raised Fish call that we have on the docket today. My name is Jamie White. I serve as an assistant for our Deputy Administrator for Farm Programs, Mr. Jared Haggart, here at the Farm Service Agency. And to kick off the call today, I have the honor and privilege of introducing our Undersecretary of the Farm Production and Conservation Mission Area, Mr. Richard Fordyce, for a few opening comments. I'll turn the floor over to you, sir.
Okay, Jamie, thank you. And hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on, I guess, where you're located. But thank you for being a part of this webinar as we talk through some of the changes to ELAP. You know, it's a longstanding program that helps support livestock producers, honeybee operations, farm-raised fish. That has really, I mean, it's been a valuable tool for folks to recover from certain adversities, and with the passage of the Working Families Tax Cuts Act, there were some changes to ELAP. You're going to hear from the expert here in just a minute as Sarah goes through those improvements, those changes, and certainly. The team has done a really good job of really understanding what those new provisions were. And I really think given the amount of things that were in the Working Families Tax Cuts Act related to the Farm Service Agency, I think they have done this just very, very quickly, getting the implementation of these provisions in place so that we can serve American agriculture in a more meaningful way. Again, thank you for being a part of this webinar. I'm probably going to turn my camera off, but I will be listening in, and I know you got the right folks up here to talk about this program. And again, thanks for being a part of it. So, Jamie, I'm kicking it back to you. Is that correct?
That is correct. Thank you, Mr. Undersecretary, for joining us this afternoon and to welcome everyone to this important discussion. I am going to provide just a few updates from a housekeeping perspective. For everyone's awareness, we are going to record this call, and that is going to provide us an opportunity to distribute this recording to those folks who are not able to attend the briefing or the webinar this afternoon. Additionally, we will take questions throughout the webinar today. There is a Q&A option at the top of the Teams window where you can access and drop those questions and answers. We may provide responses in writing during the session, or we will moderate those questions at the close of Sarah's presentation today. As the Undersecretary referenced, we have the subject matter expert, the best individual to walk through these impactful and meaningful changes under the Emergency Assistance for Livestock, Honeybees, and Farm-Raised Fish program. So it is my honor to introduce to you today Sarah Heidzig-Krager. She is the program manager that is responsible for overseeing the ELAP program at the national level. So I will turn the floor over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you for the introduction. Working with one screen today, and that makes my life a little bit more difficult. But so as was provided, the Working Family Tax Cut Act provided some changes to ELAP. And as you know, probably ELAP is split up into what I want to call three categories. There's our livestock losses, our honeybee losses, and our farm-raised fish losses. So I'm going to go through those in those different sections now. Livestock losses had really just some definitions we added to those, and that was to help really clarify some of our feed losses underneath the livestock disaster portion of it. And one of the feed losses that we cover are transportation costs for feed and livestock when it is due to drought and it's above normal. So to help define that, we had some harvest feed or feed stuff that was coming up with some questions. So we further helped explain what was the intent of the program by providing that it has to be mechanically harvested in the field and wrapped in like twine, stacked or combined our combine so that it's in a form in which basically we can transport it. So this would include like windrows and straw. Another definition we added was miles above normal, to help explain that it's really from one point to the end point and not multiple stops in between. And then further also define truckload, which includes that it's a motorized vehicle that's for land used on highways, that we're transporting the feed stuff directly to a location and they're paying based on a rate per loaded mile. And it's considered that single one trip and must clearly define that those producers are paying for that mileage and provide us that documentation. We also added some definitions for water buffalo. Water buffalo have come to need assistance under ELAP, and we didn't really have a very good defined definition of what a bull, a cow, and a non-adult water buffalo were. So we provided some definitions which align with other definitions we have for other types of livestock that are similar to water buffalo. Next, moving on to honeybees. Honeybees probably had the least amount of change. So in 2025 and prior years, normal mortality was established by the administrator based off of economic data that we could find for the normal mortality losses. But for 2026, it was put in the act that it's going to be 15%. So we just updated that to 15% for 2026 and forward. So the majority of the changes to ELAP happened underneath farm-raised fish. So what happened is farm-raised fish was expanded to provide bird depredation assistance for freshwater fish. And so this is going to pay producers based off of bird depredation, and I can get into that a little bit more on the number of acres they have for freshwater fish. And when we take into account what we're paying for the cost associated to the deterrence of those birds that are eating the fish, the value of the loss of the fish or the revenue, and the cost associated with the disease. So we're not paying for each one of these individually. We're looking at these three items as the components to come up with the amount that's being paid to the based off of their freshwater acres. So because of adding bird depredation to ELAP, we had to add a couple definitions for that. One was for farm-raised fish. We amended that to add the bird depredation portion to it. And then we had to come up with a definition for freshwater, because freshwater can have many different meanings unless we define it, because there's fish that are raised in multiple different types of salinity levels. And with it saying freshwater fish in the statute, we wanted to make sure we were clear on what species of fish that would be. So it's less than 0.5 parts per thousand of salt in that water. So the eligibility for bird depredation, the producer has to be an eligible producer, propagated or reared freshwater fish in a controlled environment. They have to suffer eligible bird depredation. They have to be maintained in fresh water and be part of a commercial use of a farming operation, and then physically located in a county where there are those birds that are consuming those fish. Some types of aquaculture that aren't eligible are crayfish and crawfish, saltwater fish, or other fish that don't meet that definition for what's freshwater. So all this payment is based off of what we call eligible acres, and we get those eligible acres from our acreage report, which is an FSA 578 that the producer will report to us. There's a date that the producers report those to, and that's by September 30th, and it's of that prior year. So it makes it a little complicated to think about because ELAP runs on a calendar year. That's our program year. And when I say the prior September 30th, that means September 30th of 2025 would be when the acreage reports needed to be completed for 2026. Now, knowing that we've had ELAP open to farm-raised fish for a number of years, a lot of our producers are used to this acreage reporting deadline. So I don't foresee it being a large issue, but we do have some late file provisions to help producers file an acreage report if they would come in late to file those acreage reports. And producers must be in control of those eligible acres, and then we pay at 85% of those eligible acres. Ineligible acres are ponds that are unused, so it's not all the time does a producer have all their ponds full. So at the time of the bird depredation, be the ponds that are in use that would be eligible. So bodies of water not under the eligible producers control would be ineligible, and water that is reduced due to drought. And I know sometimes there's some questions on that, but you can't raise aquaculture without water. So that's a good management practice to make sure you have enough water there to be able to raise and have your aquaculture survive. So what does the producer need to provide for those types of documentation? We asked, well, they need to provide a 578, so that acreage report. They also have to have an active U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services permit that has cormorants, great American egret, American white pelican, and the herons. And there's several different types of cormorants and herons that can be listed, but that needs to be required that they have an active U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service permit, because there are restrictions on when and if they can take care of those types of birds. They have to have a required update of the use of water acres. So we asked them at the time of the bird depredation what acres they had in use, because they could be certifying on that 578 all the acres that they have, which may not be the correct number for what they have in use at the time of the loss. And then we developed a new form to have them certify to their bird depredation, and that's an 870F, which the 870F has that producer tell us what acceptable documentation that they have what acceptable documentation that they would have to help support their loss. And they have to certify that they have at least 3 of these, like the documentation that the loss stemmed from bird depredation, and evidence like bird sightings, fish mortality records, aerial surveys, or even third-party assessments. They have to have expenditures or non-lethal or lethal methods to prevent or reduce those birds' presence, costs attributed to disease spread by the birds, treatments that they're having to do for the diseases, and so forth. USDA's Wildlife Services, or U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service approved bird harassment plan, and urine take reports, which the urine take reports is where they have to report how many of those types of birds they terminated or had to, and they have to report that to USDA. So they certify to this, and if we need to, the COC may ask for the documentation to support that. So the payment calculation, like I was saying, is based off of the acres. So it's really simple. It's the actual acres times the payment rate, which the payment rate has been determined to be $600 for eligible freshwater acres, times that 85%. And then that is the bird depredation loss payment. Now we should keep in mind that sequestration would apply, so that's not the net amount that the producer would receive, but that's the basic calculation for bird depredation. And there's my contact information if you have any questions after this call, but otherwise that is everything I had to cover about ELAP changes.
Sarah, thank you for that robust and expansive update. I know we've got lots of folks on the line. I'm not seeing any questions that have been dropped into the chat yet. Recognizing folks may be processing the great information that was shared today, we will hold tight to confirm that there aren't any additional questions for discussion today. All right, recognizing that everyone's time is very valuable. Again, we will be following up to this briefing, providing that link or the recorded link for the stakeholder briefing today. So we will certainly follow up and provide that to all attendees and those folks who are not able to join us. Also, as Sarah indicated in her presentation, she has shared her contact information. We will also provide a copy of that PowerPoint for your review and distillation after this stakeholder briefing as well. So certainly Sarah is a great contact, or you can submit questions in response to the email that provides the link to the recording as well as the PowerPoint information. So with that, we can go ahead and conclude today's call. Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you, Sarah, for a comprehensive update. Have a great day, everyone.